Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a weekend! What a weekend we had. Everybody, I think, globally focused on one place, and that would be what's going on in Ukraine. And I'll be honest, you know, I'm looking at the globe coming together. And, well, I'm impressed. I'm impressed by the fact that a good majority of the globe can come together. And this, to me, is why you have organizations like NATO and the UN and why you want people joining together, fighting for freedom, fighting for democracy. Good thing. Now, here at home, seeing a little bit of it as well. Seeing a little bit of coming. Sure, you can have your fringe. You got on both sides the extremes. You're going to have the Trumpkins and you're going to have the Lulus. They're going to be out there, but, you know, somewhat coming together as a country. In fact, some interesting polling numbers out. 74% of the U.S. of people polled here at home said that what's going on in Ukraine is not justified. 76% view Vladimir Putin as unfavorable in what he's doing, and you go, yeah, those seem like no-brainers. In fact, you should seem that it would be higher than that. But given the fact that we're as split as we are, I'll take that. Now, given the fact that just 3% of Trump voters, 3%, think that Biden is doing a better job leading the country than Putin is, and given the fact that I really don't think Putin gamed this out happening the way it's happened. I got to tell you, we're going to go right there. I thought he saw this going differently in his head. I really think he thought this was going to be a quick weekend in, quick weekend out, home, big parade, love, flowers, all that. Has not worked out that well. Now, 47% of Trump voters say that Putin's actually doing a better job than Biden, even though the Russian economy is on the way to total collapse because everything's being shut off. 45% say that neither Putin or Biden are doing well. And this is the part that gets me. I don't know how you can look at this scenario and go, oh no, Vlad's doing well. 95% of Trump voters view what Biden is doing unfavorably. And you go, okay, well, it is what it is. 87% view what Biden is doing as very unfavorable. Now, in getting into what's going into Ukraine, and I've gotten a lot of crazy. It seems like the crazy comes out during these moments, and that's okay because we need to have these conversations. The 26% who say we should have nothing to do with it, no stake, we've got no stake in it, shouldn't do anything. Those are the 26% who filled up my email box. Those were the folks who were going, no, what would you do here? What would you do there? Understand, I grew up understanding that NATO was, well, first it was put into place to hold the Soviet Union in check, did not want communism spreading, wanted to hold on to democracy. But also the other part of NATO's mission was to make sure that you didn't have nationalist military buildups like you had in Germany. That's not great either. So that you didn't have this kind of hyper-nationalist militarism that would, again, sweep across and cause more wars. The idea is the more friendly we are, the more we're on the same page, the more we agree, the more we defend each other, the better, and the more politically aligned everyone is, the better. So when everyone say, well, NATO should have been shut down after the Soviet, no, that was part of their mission. But the other part of it was to make sure that you didn't have the rise of the other side either. And I think it's done a pretty good job of that. And to make it so that you didn't have these kind of wars, that all of us come together in times of crisis and say, no, we're not going to allow this. I'll defend you, you defend me. This way we're all more secure. And I had a bunch of people going, but how would you like it? If Russia signed an agreement with Cuba. Well, they did. That they have one. If we attack Cuba, they may jump in the middle of it. Now understand, this is where this argument breaks down for me. Ukraine is a country moving towards democracy. They want to be free. They want to move in a direction. They don't want to be part of Russia. They don't want to be part of really didn't want to be part of the EU until today, where you've got, Zelensky going, hey, now we're ready to come over. We're moving in that direction. They wanted to be a free country. And as soon as Putin started doing these things he's been doing, now they've got to go, which way do we go? Did the U.S. scream too much when Putin basically took over Belarus? Oh, I know, he didn't take it over. They agreed to with each other. They have a mutual defense pact. In fact, the Belarus military is now invading Ukraine. That was on the Ukraine border. That's on the border of other NATO countries. So this argument that I keep getting, and I'm getting all this crazy stuff that we shouldn't be there for this reason, we shouldn't be there for this reason. Understand, the criminal in this is Vladimir Putin. Nobody wants this. Nobody. The criminal in this, the rich guy who was sending poor and working class Russian kids into Ukraine to kill people, other poor and working class people, is Vladimir Putin. This is his baby. He owns this. And I don't care what Ted Cruz is out there saying that, Europe's on the verge of war because of Joe Biden. This isn't Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden has done everything an American president could do right now. He's done everything. In fact, he's pulled the world together better than I thought could possibly be done. And yet you have in this poll 67% of Trump of Trump voters going, yeah, he's not tough enough. Well, how much tougher are you going to get? Because nobody wants to put boots on the ground. Nobody wants to bomb the 40-mile-long Russian military train that's coming in full of soldiers and armament. Nobody wants to bomb that. Nobody wants World War III, but the majority of us say we should be supporting the Ukrainians. Get them the military armaments they need, get them the support they need, sanctions, do what we can, but the fight ultimately is with the Ukrainian people having to defend their country and their freedom. Now, having said that, the other side, and I get this from the left in a huge way, and look, I'm not somebody who believes in starting a war. I'm not a war person, but I'm also not a pacifist. I have been in a fight or two in my lifetime. The reality is, you have two choices in these moments. The Ukrainian people have two choices. They can surrender, as some are saying they should do. Some American military types. And I look at this Colonel. Colonel Doug McGregor was on Trey Gowdy's Fox TV show. And again, am I surprised this is what's coming from Fox? No, but this is what the Colonel had to say.
In our usual effort to demonize him and his country, we need to remember that Ukraine is fourth from the bottom of 158 countries in the world as corrupt. Russia is perhaps 3 or 4 places above them. This is not the liberal democracy, the shining example that everyone says it is. Far from it. Mr. Zelensky has jailed journalists and his political opposition. I think we need to stay out of it. The American people think we should stay out of it. The Europeans think we should stay out of it. And we should stop shipping weapons and encouraging Ukrainians to die in what is a hopeless endeavor.
So when you say stay out of it, you mean no sanctions, no military aid, just let Russia take the portion of Ukraine they want to take?
Yes, absolutely. I see no reason why we should fight with the Russians over something that they have been talking about for years. We simply chose to ignore it. And more important, the population there is indistinguishable from their own.
The population is indistinguishable. And that's the weird thing, because it's true. They have a common language. But you heard them. And this has been the right-wing line for a while. We should stay out of it. None of our business, except the expansion of a Russian state. Because once Ukraine goes, then what? Then do we find other NATO-aligned countries? And do we wait for that as they grow stronger? And is that the goal? The other part that I found interesting about the Colonel's statement is it's hopeless. Well, I don't think you should tell that to the Ukrainian people. They don't seem to think it's hopeless. They are fighting for their freedom. And now this is coming on the channel that talks about freedom. This is the channel that talks about liberty. This is the channel that pumps up all those so-called patriots driving their trucks, because they want freedom. Yet you want to talk about freedom fighters. Yeah, is it overwhelming? Yeah, I got to tell you, I didn't think the Ukraine would hold on this long. I didn't think the Ukrainian people would hold out this long. I thought the Russian military would shock and awe them, and they've been bombarding them. But these are people who will stand up and fight. Now, on the left, I got people saying, well, would you say this about those African countries? Implying that I'm being racist. And look, there is some part of racism in this a little bit, I'm sure. That these are white people who are fighting each other, and yeah, we got to get in the middle of this. But for me, it's not that at all. For me, it's our interests, our security interests. I view Vladimir Putin as somebody who wants to rebuild the old Soviet Union, wants to bring back that kind of power and re-engage the world as, well, the superpower that he remembers them being. That is bad for democracy. That is bad for global security. And in this moment, you have to stand up to the bully. And the world is doing that. The part that I love is everyone saying, well, Biden's not tough enough. I don't want Biden to be tough enough. I want the world to stand up as they are doing, and doing in a big way. Now, what's interesting, things are not going well. Things not going well at all, because you now have two Russian oligarchs, this Mikhail Friedman and Oleg Deripaska, who have basically broken ranks with the Kremlin and calling for an end immediately to the Russian war in Ukraine, which I think is wow. And I think that has a little bit to do with the fact that right now, and I love this image, there's no image funnier in this moment. I know there's nothing funny about war, but there's nothing funnier than billionaires racing to their yachts as the repo man shows up to tow them away. Because right now, we're going after their assets. And one of the things that they're going after, these $100 million, $500 million yachts that they can then sell and maybe fund the rebuilding of Ukraine. So they're all racing to their yachts. They're all racing to get out into water so the repo man can't come and take them. I mean, it would seem like almost, and this, again, not a funny moment, but it would be funny to watch. It just is what it is. Now, it's bad. The world is coming together when Switzerland has jumped in and said that they're going to freeze Russian assets, completely pushing aside that neutrality thing and saying, nope, we're going to join with the rest of the world in freezing, making this painful for the wealthy in Russia, to put pressure on Putin to stop this. That, to me, right there is one of those things where you go, wow, I never thought that had happened. The Swiss they've been neutral for always. But here we are. The shipping container company Maersk, they are suspending container shipments to Russia. Basically, everything is kind of stopping. Now, what's interesting to me is we're going to start seeing the Republicans pivot. It's going to happen. We've already seen Trump kind of turn. We've already seen his turn that go, well, NATO wouldn't be this strong if it weren't for me. If it weren't for me trying to destroy it, if it weren't for me trying to tear NATO apart, you know, if I didn't act swiftly and strongly, there wouldn't be a NATO. There'd be no NATO. Except he said that he was going to break us out of that. He was going to cut our alliance with NATO if he was elected again. But again, no reality world. And I'm waiting for the Tucker Carlsons and the rest of them who have just said some really dumb stuff to come out and oh no, I was always against it. Chris Christie has come out. He slammed Trump for praising Putin, saying that no walking that back, history is watching. Yeah, you don't get to say Putin's a genius and he's savvy and he's smart. You don't get to praise him and then say, oh, well, if it weren't for me. You don't get that. And again, we're going to watch as the right-wing mouthpieces, because I listened to a talking head this morning as I was driving to a doctor appointment, go on and on about how, Republicans believe in freedom and how they're now with the Ukrainians and how just like they were with the people during the civil rights movement. And I'm going, what? Did I miss something? And how they were with, everyone, women, in letting them vote, and how, they were all on board with all of these things and all of these fights throughout history. They were all on the right side of every fight for freedom in history, according to this guy. And, I guess his minions will believe it. What I'm interested to see is, a lot of these people, they've been on the Putin side for a bit. When that pivot happens, does the faithful continue to buy it? And that's the weird part in all this. Do they continue to buy it? And I fear that they will. Because, well, they've never shown any interest in not. For instance, I heard one of them say that it was because of Donald Trump that Ukraine has the tank busters and the weapons that they have. And he was very proud of this, very, very proud of the fact that, Donald Trump did this work. Donald Trump was, instrumental in doing this, without bothering to mention the fact that the resources that went into getting those things to them came with the quid pro quo perfect phone call. Didn't mention that. Didn't bother mentioning that Congress had already, decided on this before he was president. This was a continuation. He just had to sign off on it. And never mind the fact that Trump and his minions were, again, trying to extract their pound of flesh. Was it dirt on Biden? Probably. Was it something financial? I wouldn't doubt it. But now they want to rewrite history. And I find it interesting that, the minions, the Tucker Carlson crowd, they're the ones out there raising the stink because they think they know something. And I saw this tweet by New Jersey Representative Tom Malonsky. Tom tweeted out, he said, "My office is now getting calls from folks who say they watch Tucker Carlson, are upset that we're not siding with Russia in its threats to invade Ukraine, and who want me to support Russia and their reasonable positions." But you got Josh Hawley who's saying we should stay out of it. Stay out of it. We shouldn't be the world's policeman. And I've heard this a lot. We shouldn't be the world's policeman. And on an immediate level, I'm going, yeah, I don't know that I don't want us to be the world's policeman. And I go, yeah, I think we shouldn't be the world's policeman until I go, okay, we pull out, we leave a giant void. Who am I then comfortable with filling that void? Now remember, I'm not somebody who wants to start wars. I'm not somebody who wants to fight. But I do ask the question of how do we stop fights? So if we pull out of all these places and we are no longer the world's policeman, who will be? Who are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with Putin doing that? China? Because we don't live in a world where no one will do it. We live in a world where somebody will. And look, for all the things we've done wrong, and Lord knows we have done a lot wrong. For all the things we didn't get right, all the things we did wrong, for all the things we screwed up, absolutely. I don't think I want anyone else in that position. That simple. Now, Steve Bannon, he's saying that his minions are saying, well, it's that Greta Thunberg. That's her fault because of the green stuff. Ron Johnson blamed Alexander Vindman, Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, because, well, the perfect phone call was perfect after all. And, Donald Trump didn't actually get anything out of it except impeached. And I look at this and I go, how do we stop that? And then the sane part of me steps in. You got to ignore them. They're the fives. You're always going to have fives. You're always going to have extremists. You're always going to have people on the fringe. You let it go. Let the fives go. You got to work where you can do the work. And fortunately, the rest of the world seems to be moving in the right direction. And even in sports, the Russian Grand Prix has been canceled. The Formula One folks said, sorry, we're out. The soccer people, FIFA, I don't know much about soccer, but FIFA, they have decided no more Russia in the World Cup. They've ejected Russia from qualifying for the World Cup there. The IOC, the International Olympic Committee, they recommended banning all Russian and Belarusian athletes from any international competitions. World Rugby people have sanctioned Russia and Belarus. This is what happens when the world comes together. And why? Because this is very clear cut. There is one guy, and I started with this and I'm going to end with it. There is one guy, one extremely wealthy, probably the wealthiest man in the world, one extremely wealthy guy who is sending poor and working class Russian kids into a neighboring country to kill other poor and working class kids. And not just kids, 18 to 80, they're taking everybody. That's wrong. And that's what unites us. And this is where someone came to me and said, well, why don't we, if NATO is so great, why don't we let Russia come into NATO? I go, well, if Russia would abide by what NATO stands for, then yeah, I have no problem with that. The problem is they won't. And they didn't apply. Now, for all those who are saying that, well, Russia's doing this because of NATO, Ukraine filed its application back in 2008. That's a long time ago. Still haven't been put in it. So, again, it seems to me all of these false claims, like the Nazis, look, you got extremists in every country. There are Nazis everywhere. NATO's going to expand. All of this stuff seems like, just convenient. When the reality is, he just wants to rob and pillage. He just wants to steal. I got lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break. Right back with Will Bunch, national columnist over at the Philadelphia Daily and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Stick around. Right back. Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day with whistles blowing, the call to strike could be heard through the aisles of Woolworth in downtown Detroit. 108 saleswomen walked away from their workstations and cash registers. The 8-day sit-down had begun. The women saw from the experience in Flint that sit-down strikes were effective. They evicted management, barricaded the doors, and found 200 or so customers still inside the store wanting to join them. The strikers issued their demands: a 10-cent an hour raise, an 8-hour workday, union recognition and a union hiring hall, free uniforms and laundering, and more. Kresge department stores immediately gave their workers a raise in order to prevent similar stoppages. The striking women at Woolworth made themselves comfortable, and the sit-down soon spread to a second store. Leaders from Local 705 of the Hotel Employees and Restaurant Employees Union threatened a nationwide strike if demands were not met. Union cooks provided meals, and union musicians provided entertainment. Hotel workers from across the city picketed in front of the store in a show of solidarity. After 7 days, Woolworth's management caved and agreed to most of the strikers' demands. High turnover in the workforce would undo contract gains at area Woolworth stores soon after the sit-down. But the victory electrified retail workers across the country. The sit-down spread to retailers in St. Louis, New York, San Francisco, Minnesota, and Washington. In 3 strikes, miners, musicians, sales girls, and the fighting spirit of labor's last century, Dana Frank notes that, quote, over 60 years later, unions today in department stores all over the country owe their existence in part to the Woolworth strike. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Mega investor Warren Buffett once held a big portfolio of daily and weekly newspapers, and he specialized in squeezing out competitors, so each held a local monopoly. Then he'd chop staff and news content, letting him glean annual profit margins above 30%. But alas for poor Warren, along came the internet, allowing people to root around for free to find local information missing from his hollowed-out papers. They began losing readers, advertising, and profits, so in 2020, Buffett sold out his entire portfolio. But rather than concede that maybe his slash-and-burn profit maximization approach had produced inferior products, the Oracle of Omaha, as Wall Street had labeled him, blasted the whole idea of local newspapers as dinosaurs. They're toast, he proclaimed. But wait, your oracleness. When done right, local publications both chronicle and help shape a community story. And that's a social benefit that's as valuable and as marketable as ever. It's not that people have given up on local news, but that corporate-owned papers did. They're not local, not newsy, and not of, by and far, the workaday people in our communities. For example, nearly every corporate daily publishes a business section, which mostly amounts to yesterday's stock prices, corporate press releases, and syndicated filler. Does even 1% of the population read that stuff? Meanwhile, how about economic news of interest to the great majority of locals who are workaday families? Where's the regular section that digs into the wages, workplace conditions, and other real-life issues that confront this majority on a daily basis? This is Jim Hightower saying the relevant indicator of the well-being of nearly every American family is not the Dow Jones average, but the Doug Jones average. How are Doug and Donna doing? That's news that would sell papers.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, quote of the day. Actually, we'll throw out 2 quotes of the day. Howard Stern said, I voted for many Republicans. I don't see how I could ever go back to that. And look, I don't know how you do that either in this day, especially looking at some of the positions they've taken. And Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell came out and said there's no place in the Republican Party for white supremacists and anti-Semitism. I got to tell you, I thought that was all that what the Republican Party is. But hey, evidently there's no place, so I guess there's going to be nobody left. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine and here at home with some of the insanity that we've been seeing. I've asked our good friend Will Bunch to come talk with us. Will is the national columnist for the Philly Daily News. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, man.
So, we're in this moment where, I asked the question a number of times. How did the Republican Party go from that party of Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall to the Russian leader is smart, genius, savvy. We should do nothing. We should stay out of anything. We should let them just roll over Ukraine. How did that happen?
I think it's a party that just admires and just loves this strongman concept. Not that I think in the real world either Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin are really that strong, but that the image they portray of the strongman. I mean, I think some of it ties into the increasingly strong, Christian fundamentalist streak in the Republican Party, because there have been a lot of surveys that, people with that worldview tend to also have an authoritarian worldview, and they look at somebody like a Putin and they see him as standing up for his country and his country's traditional values, standing up against things like LGBTQ rights, which to them is strength, which is unfortunate. Somebody who portrays a macho image, who would never use, would never say what his pronouns are, that are the kind of things that drive the right crazy nowadays. And so there's an admiration, and at one point they had the restraint to at least temper that by saying, well, but he's a dictator or whatever. But I think it got to a point where no, we just admire. We'd rather have a strong leader like Putin than somebody that they claim is weak like Biden, which is, the last week has shown the absurdity of that whole view, has it not? I think Biden, he's not perfect, but I think on this issue, he's shown tremendous strength in rallying allies, getting countries like Germany that had some reluctance, getting them on board, and forming this united front. And look at the way the world is united against Russia and in favor of Ukraine. And Joe Biden is the guy who took the lead on that. He's clearly, I think, kind of first among equals in that coalition. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Whereas, Putin, this strongman that people on the right admired, went into Ukraine. He clearly had no plan in any sense. He had no plan to win the war. He had no plan to deal with these crippling economic sanctions that are really hitting his country hard. And he increasingly looks like somebody who's just detached from reality.
Yeah, and if you saw the picture of him in the boardroom, he's like 40 feet away from everybody else. And the first thing that goes into my head is, yeah, he may be afraid of COVID, but I think he's more afraid of oligarchs, sending some airborne poisons his way, as has been accused. He has been accused of doing in the past.
Yeah, projecting, right? He probably doesn't want to. He probably doesn't want to stand near the window any more than his enemies want to stand near the window at this point. And through history, leaders like him, especially in Russia, but around the world, people with his portfolio have often met a bitter end, he certainly has all the signs of paranoia. And the long table thing is just bizarre. And, it may be a case where we're seeing for the first time, we've talked so much in the last 2 years about how COVID has affected our mental health. Well, here's somebody whose mental health may have been affected by the isolation and the anxieties and the paranoia of the COVID age, and he's somebody with a nuclear arsenal, which is just scary, right?
Yeah.
So,
now you have a new piece out that I think is incredibly important, and I've been saying for the longest time that this election cycle for Democrats, and this is even before Putin invaded Ukraine. I've been saying the issue here is, are you in favor of democracy or are you not? Do you believe in the rule of law or don't you? This is kind of that moment. Do you believe in democracy? Do you believe in freedom as we understand it, or don't you? And we're seeing that still kind of playing out in some of the rhetoric that's going around today.
Yeah, what's interesting is, I've been making that argument for months, before we knew that Putin was going to go into Ukraine. And to me, I saw it being framed around issues like the book banning that's going on in so many of our schools and so many libraries around the country. The thing is, the vast middle, the voters that are always being competed for in these elections, most middle Americans, or whatever you want to call them, don't support banning books. I've seen many polls, I've seen focus groups, they disapprove of that kind of censorship. The reality is, most Americans want their kids to learn about subjects like racism. particularly, when you have these bans which would really prohibit teachers from talking about Martin Luther King or talking about Rosa Parks or people that are just widely accepted as kind of heroic icons of the civil rights movement. I think the average voter in the middle is actually offended by that. And I've urged the Democrats, in fact, I've been thinking about doing this, and I probably will do this in a column someday. I may just write the ad for the Democrats of what they need to say, because they can go on TV and, you can have an ad showing Martin Luther King saying the quote that even conservatives love from him about being judged by the content of your character rather than the color of your skin. And then you come back and say, your Republican governor wants to pass a law that would prevent your kid from learning about that in school. I think it's really powerful. And, and now, like you said, with this Ukraine situation, as I wrote in my column over the weekend, it's a time for choosing. Are you on the side of democracy, or are you, like the Donald Trumps and the Tucker Carlsons of the world? Are you on the side of decadence, basically? How can you look at these images coming out of Ukraine of elderly men kneeling in front of tanks, these newlyweds who took up rifles on their honeymoon, sped up their wedding and went online and got rifles to defend Kiev. Just everyday people, teachers and accountants walking down the streets in patrols, having these events where they mix up Molotov cocktails. I don't celebrate violence, but you have to celebrate people defending their country against these invaders, because they're really defending democracy. This is not, sometimes in war it can be ambiguous, right? That both countries are kind of bad. They both have dictators, or neither country is really that democratic. That's not the case here. Vladimir Zelensky was elected just like Joe Biden was elected, in a vote of the people. He's an unlikely president who's risen to the occasion. And, you have this country in Russia that is a fake democracy, where the elections are rigged for Putin, where people who threaten to challenge Putin are thrown in jail or unfortunately murdered, like, his main rival was murdered 10 years ago, right near the Kremlin, or they're thrown in jail. And the choice couldn't be any more stark. Yeah. And I think something like that's so cut and dried. I think for Americans who maybe are getting lost in the day to day and not seeing the big picture of what's happening in this country, maybe they should realize that we have to defend democracy on our soil. You have a political party that's trying to curtail voting rights. You have a political party that's trying to censor what kids can read and what teachers can say in the classroom.
Yeah, there's a lot of fights out there. There really are. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Will Bunch. Will's a national columnist for the Philly Daily News, and then the Philadelphia Inquirer. If you want to take a look at the work that he does, we'll get links out on social media on how you can see the great stuff that he does. Also, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast, take the program on the go wherever you go. Now, Will, we're talking about freedom, and we're in this moment where, all I hear on right-wing radio and, on that Fox channel over there is about this big freedom rally. You got these truckers who are there, their freedom's been impeded upon. Someone made them wear a mask or protect themselves. I guess there's part of me that goes, what really is the definition of freedom when you're comparing people who are fighting for their lives in a place like Ukraine, or people who are just whining and complaining, who have always had such privilege? It doesn't seem like they both match. Or am I just being divisive?
No, they don't. I think I think the Ukraine example, it's people fighting for the right to choose their own government, for the right to speak out, for the right to live when they're being invaded by Russians. And like you said, these convoys, and it's funny how all of a sudden you've heard so little about convoys. Well, you've heard about Russian convoys, but these trucker convoys, you've heard so little about them in the last 5 days. Now that's something that really matters is happening out there. I think it's just made these trucker convoys look really small. But like you said, I mean, I think the freedom they're fighting for, I think they're confusing privilege for freedom. You know, I mean, you're talking about the freedom to oppress people. You know, what's the freedom in not wearing a mask? Freedom to possibly infect other people with the disease. And many of these alleged threats to freedom aren't even real. You know, I mean, certainly in the United States, I mean, there's virtually no mandates. There's very few vaccine mandates, just for some civic employees and healthcare workers, but not that many. There's we've seen most of the mask mandates disappear. So what are these people protesting? I think it's just an attitude. It's all
part of the grievance tour, because you got to have something to complain about.
Right.
It's an angry old white guy grievance tour 2022. That's really what it really is all about. And when you put it to the backdrop of these people who are under attack and are fighting for their lives, especially as you see the images of this 40-mile long convoy of military armament and soldiers, bearing down on the capital city there's a whole different kind of worldview.
That's a convoy that's taken away people's freedoms. I mean, and it kind of speaks to brute force and what brute force can do and what it's all about. Whereas freedom is really the power of individual choice. These individuals in Ukraine have to make incredible choices right now, whether they want to stay and defend their country or whether they want to try and flee to a neighboring country like Poland. And these are existential choices, and people, freedom for people is just the freedom to make those kinds of choices,
right.
And the convoy is in their case, this 40-mile convoy of people with guns is what's threatening that freedom. And I think, again, I mean, it just shows us what all this is really all about.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Will Bunch. Will is a national opinion columnist over at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I got it wrong before. It's the Inquirer. We'll get links out on social media. How you can take a look.
It's complicated. You don't want a 5-minute.
I don't, and I just saw it. I'm going to go with the Inquirer for that one.
Inquirer, but we brand it all as the Inquirer these days. So. But God bless the Daily News.
There you go. I just happened to see that. So if you got a thought, question, comment, something you want to ask Will, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Will, I've been getting a lot of people attacking my position. And from the very beginning, my position was extremely clear. I have not moved one bit. Putin is a rich guy with a lot of power who is looking to send poor and working class Russian kids into Ukraine to kill poor and working class people there for whatever his reasons are. A big part of it is theft, about more power and more influence and more wealth for him and his oligarch buddies. That for me has never changed. He is the giant a-hole in this situation, and everything we can do to push back on that guy for me is the right direction. But I'm then getting all of the other stuff. NATO was never meant to last past the Warsaw Pact. It was supposed to be broken up after the fall of the Soviet Union, which is not true, I found out. Also there as well, it's, how would you like it if Russia had an agreement with Cuba? Well, they do. So I look at all of these other arguments as deflections and almost as justifying what Putin is doing. So in that vein, I view those people as supporting Putin.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. I mean, look, I think there actually is, and I have to confess, I haven't followed it until recently as closely as I should. But I mean, there's a conversation to be had about NATO and what its purpose is and how big it should be. I mean, Tom Friedman of all people, had a piece the other day questioning whether NATO really needed to keep expanding once the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. And I do believe generally, whatever you think about NATO, I do wish we had done more to truly encourage real democracy in Russia during those critical first 10 or 15 years before Putin really took hold.
Right. Instead of allowing Wall Street and the wealthy to steal, rob, and cheat the Russian people out of all of the wealth that they've pocketed. I'm right there with you.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, instead of teaching them to be a democracy, I think we went over there and taught them how to be a kleptocracy, and we taught them how to create billionaire oligarchs in their country, just like we created billionaire oligarchs in our country. And it's truly unfortunate. And I think it's an opportunity that's lost because, the Russian people are like the people in most countries. Most of them want freedom. Most of them want to be able to elect their government and be able to, move about freely and do the things they want to do. And they've been saddled back into a different kind of czar than the czars that they had for centuries before this, and it's quite unfortunate. But I mean, your broader point about Putin, I couldn't agree more. I mean, don't forget, Rick. I mean, I'm a journalist, and this is a guy who has killed dozens of journalists just for doing their job. Yep. I mean, to me, that's kind of I don't want to sound like I'm self-centered that I judge. I mean, there's a lot of things I would judge a leader by, but for me, that's kind of a litmus test. The fact that this guy, the journalists who are critical of him aren't just ostracized; they get thrown out of windows. I mean, and just like people who dissent against his government. I mean, when you think back on all the things this guy has gotten away with over the years, poisoning his enemies even when they're on foreign soil. I mean, there was a guy, I think it was the guy who was the founder of RT or somebody who was an insider who was murdered here in Washington D.C. in his hotel room. The reach of his thugs is extended all over the world, and you can't justify that. I've always argued for a U.S. foreign policy that was less militaristic and more built around peace. And
me too. Look, Will, I'm as anti-war as anybody. Don't want to fight anybody, but there is a moment where you go, once someone punches you in the mouth, you gotta either you respond or you get away. This is a moment where the world has stepped together. And this isn't just the U.S. It's just not me. It's not you. This is the world coming together, telling this one guy, this one rich guy who is sending his citizens, his young kids and young working class citizens into another country to kill and to be killed. This is all on him. And for me, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah. There's no on one hand, on the other hand here. There's only one bad guy in this situation. And you're right. And I mean, what's fascinating is, I think we all agree, anybody who knows the history of World War II, for example, knows that no matter how peace-loving your people are, there are moments when you need to find ways to rally together and stop aggression. And what's fascinating to see in this situation so far is you're seeing an effort to stop Putin's aggression, but also trying not to start World War III. And so far, so good, right? I mean, you've seen an unprecedented effort to use tools like economic sanctions to try and stop him, to try and get arms to the Ukrainian people, but without sending U.S. troops or NATO troops into the country. And that's good so far. And so far, Putin's invasion has not succeeded on the level he thought it would succeed. So far things are going well. I mean, obviously it's a fluid situation. Like you said, you still have this massive column of tanks moving through the country, and they seem to have stepped up their bombing of civilian targets, which is horrific. And we don't know how all this is going to play out. But I think right now trying to use every tool at our disposal to stop Putin and stop his aggression, but yet also try and prevent World War III is the way to go for now. And so far, I can't criticize our government or our allies for anything they've done so far in this situation.
Yeah, I think Joe Biden has done absolutely everything that any president would have done, with the exception of the last guy. No idea what the last guy would have done. I do know what has been reported, that he said he was going to try and get us out of NATO, even though now he's taking credit because, hey, if it weren't for him, NATO wouldn't be this strong. Thank goodness NATO's there because of Donald Trump is the pivot. So my last question is, all of these mouthpieces who are now, yesterday were, pro-Putin, anti-Biden, us being involved. When that pivot happens, do you think the American people will buy it?
I don't know. I'm interested to see. I mean, I would love to think that the Democrats can go out there and say, they've got these statements on tape, use them against some of their opponents and say, I've always been on the side of democracy. Here's what your guy said 6 months ago and whatever. What I don't know is, historically, American voters have not cared as much about foreign policy, and I mean, that's why, in my column, that's why I argue, let's reframe this a little bit. This isn't just conventional foreign policy in my book. This is a fight for democracy that is happening in Ukraine, but it's also happening in the United States at the same time. And I think if you can link those two things, like I said, if you can link people fighting for freedom in Ukraine with, people fighting for the freedom to read and the freedom to learn here in America, and the freedom to vote, against all this voter suppression. I think that's the linkage you want to make, and I think that's a winning formula for the Democrats or anybody who can make that argument.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mark me on Team Freedom. Whatever we have to do to keep and maintain our ability to be free and to help others achieve that, I am right there. But Will, I appreciate you taking some time for us. As always, great stuff. I hope folks will check out your work. We'll get links out on social media. I can check out the Philly Inquirer articles that you put out. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Good stuff, as always. Like I said, our good friend Will Bunch. Look, at the end of this, it's simple. Like I said, like we talked about, it is completely, it's simple. There's one guy. One guy's doing this. One. That's Vladimir Putin. He can end this tomorrow. He can turn those tanks around. He can take all those kids, those poor and working class kids that he's signed up to go and slaughter people in another country, and he can take them home. And this could stop. Then you want to sit down, you want to negotiate, then you want to talk about NATO expansion, then you want to talk about the other stuff. That's another day. But as long as the aggression is happening, the world cannot allow it to continue. And as I said, Joe Biden gets credit for this. He pulled this globe together in a way that nobody else could. I truly believe that. To get the Germans to say, you know what, we're going to shut off that pipeline in winter when they desperately need that energy. To get Switzerland. I mean, I'm literally stunned by that. To get Switzerland, who is always neutral and never lets anybody into their banking world, say we're going to start freezing Russian assets. That's huge. That means the oligarchs are not just scrambling to save their yachts from the repo man. They're heading to the local bank to salvage what little they can grab before Uncle Sam and the rest of the world grabs a hold of it to pay reparations for the damage that Putin's doing. And at some point, I think Putin's got to worry. There may be a window in his future. There may be indeed. Anyway, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Take the program on the go. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Also, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Nord Stream 2 will not, as I promised, will not move forward.
Germany agrees. Pulls plug on Russia's critical gas pipeline. Fourth tropical cyclone in 4 weeks batters Madagascar. U.S. fracking industry is curtailing production to goose fossil fuel prices.
Even more?
Plus, Dakota Access Pipeline developer loses bid to block new environmental assessment.
All of those losers and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Cheap oil is a deterrent from tyrannical third world dictators from invading other countries. Could it be that Greta Thunberg and Leonardo DiCaprio actually might be to blame for what Vladimir Putin is doing?
No, it could not. And her name is Thunberg.
That's a take you will not hear anywhere else.
For good reason, Charlie Kirk, you dunderhead. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, normally we would think your lead would be in Russia and Germany today, but nope, climate change is moving us across the world.
Yes, it is. Compounding tragedy in Madagascar off the coast of eastern Africa. Madagascar was hit with the fourth tropical cyclone in just 4 weeks on Tuesday, intensifying an ongoing humanitarian crisis. The back-to-back cyclones have killed at least 200 and left hundreds of thousands homeless in one of the poorest countries in the world.
That's back-to-back cyclones.
Yes. The United Nations warns Madagascar is facing the world's first climate change famine caused directly by man-made global warming due to years of unrelenting drought. Here in the U.S., AP reports that in California, which is mired in its third year of severe drought, federal water managers said this week they can't deliver any water from reservoirs to farmers in the state's biggest agricultural region. That will force some to plant fewer crops in a region that supplies the bulk of the nation's fruits, nuts, and vegetables.
Maybe plant fewer almonds, which take up an inordinate amount of water.
Correct. In other news, fossil fuel prices were already spiking on global markets to their highest levels since 2014 due to rising demand and tight supplies. So it certainly didn't help when Russian President Vladimir Putin intensified aggressive actions toward neighboring Ukraine.
Well, it depends who you say it didn't help.
That, in turn, triggered the U.S. and Europe to initiate sanctions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has indefinitely halted certification of the controversial $11 billion Nord Stream 2 methane gas pipeline from Russia. Potential additional EU actions could include banking restrictions impeding Russia's ability to export its oil and gas, a pillar of the Russian economy, that could further curtail global supply. Everyone is bracing for higher energy prices, especially Europe, which is dependent on Russia for about 40% of its oil and gas.
Maybe that was never a good idea.
Well, on Wednesday, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that Europe has sufficient supplies to get through the winter, and she said Russia's actions have underscored the risk of relying on Russian fossil fuels. She said the EU will accelerate its shift to clean energy.
This crisis shows that Europe is still too dependent on Russian gas. We have to diversify our supplies. We will have to massively invest in renewable energy. That's where the future is, because this is a strategic investment in our energy independence.
President Biden on Wednesday also slapped sanctions on Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline and said the administration will take measures to mitigate the economic impact on Americans from higher fossil energy prices, which Republicans hope to make a political problem for Biden and congressional Democrats in the critical midterm elections in November.
Because of course they do. Hey, there may be war and tens of thousands of people killed, but it's great political news for us.
Higher prices mean higher profits for the oil and gas industry, but it's not just Russia's actions causing fossil fuel prices to jump. A new report by the American Prospect finds that after flooding the market for a decade, now the oil and gas fracking industry in the U.S. is restricting production intentionally to goose prices in order to return more cash to investors.
Naturally.
Finally, a sliver of good news. The U.S. Supreme Court has rejected an attempt by the owner of the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline to block a new environmental review. The pipeline is opposed by nearby Native American tribes because of the threat of a spill to their drinking water supply. Energy Transfer's pipeline has been operating without a permit while the new assessment is underway, which the company has previously said leaves the pipeline vulnerable to being shut down.
Our Supreme Court blocked the challenge?
Yeah.
Our packed and stolen Supreme Court?
Yep.
Are you okay, Supreme Court? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. This has been your Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So my head's still stuck on the crazy woman from Delaware. So excited about, being able to do like Putin does in Russia, grabbing those undocumented people and throwing them out of the country, eventually going after those people, put any subgroup into those people you want. And being able to abuse them and throw them out of the country and do what you will. Because she identifies more with Vlad than with Joe Biden, which is shocking on a certain level, unless you've been following the religious right as long as I have, and have been afraid of the rise of the crazy religious right. And then when I see Pat Robertson, and I don't know where they dug him up from, but Pat ain't looking good, but he came out all bunched up in his Depends and said that, hey, this is great. It's great because, Putin's gonna bring the end times on. He says people say that Putin's out of his mind. Yes, maybe so. But at the same time, he's being compelled by God. He went into Ukraine, but that wasn't his goal. His goal was to move against Israel ultimately. And this is going into Israel, he says, the staging area for the great biblical army that will gather for Armageddon. Yes, this is it. This is the end of times. Crazy, crazy people. And here to share some thoughts on just how crazy these people are, I've asked our good friend Chrissy Stroop to come talk with us. Chrissy is the person I go to on everything Russia and everything crazy religion. She's also a columnist for Open Democracy, senior correspondent for Religion Dispatches, and the author of Empty the Pews, Stories of Leaving the Church. Chrissy, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Thanks so much for having me.
So I got to start with the Pat Robertson thing. Let's start with that crazy first. It's Armageddon. It's the end times. Putin has been, however you want to put it, infected, instructed, mobilized, pushed, coerced, goosed, whatever you want to say. God is going after Putin to go into Ukraine because we got to build up that army to go to Israel. How freaking crazy
is that? This is bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers, even by Pat Robertson standards. As you say, the guy doesn't seem to have aged well now. He's using a very old script here on the Christian right. This is a Cold War era script. Which basically people like Hal Lindsey and John Hagee, these supposed prophets, right? These very apocalyptic pastors, authors, they predicted that the Soviet Union, which they didn't actually understand very well, like many Americans, they sort of mostly conflated it with Russia, even though the Soviet Union was always more complicated than that. Modern Russia is more complicated than that. It's a very multi-ethnic state. But yeah, that Russia was going to lead the evil forces in the Battle of Armageddon at the end of the world. Why did that make sense to them? Because the Soviet Union was godless, basically, right? So they thought, well, okay, this big godless power doesn't like Israel, which was true. The Soviet Union had a pretty rocky relationship with Israel once it was founded. After World War II, oddly enough, anti-Semitism increased in the Soviet Union after the founding of the modern state of Israel in 1948, increased substantially. In fact, Stalin, just before he died in 1953, was apparently plotting another purge, and it's referred to as the Doctor's Plot, but it was apparently going to target Jewish intellectuals, Jewish doctors primarily, at least at the beginning. Thankfully, Stalin died before he could carry that one out.
Yeah, because why would you want doctors around?
I mean, the guy purged a lot of his Red Army generals, and then look how badly the Soviet Union did at the beginning of World War II, right? He didn't listen to his military intelligence either, just like Donald Trump, as far as that goes. But
right, so,
yeah, so it's an old script.
The godless Soviet Union is going to be the place where the staging army for Armageddon, and yet we're in a moment where you've got this crazy woman who ran for Senate in Delaware saying that he's hyper Christian, nationalist Christianity, that now they're hyper Christian. How does that how does that balance?
Yeah, well, she's more up to date. She's more with the program, with where a lot of the people on the Christian right are now. They were all about Putin. Now I think they're going to hedge a little bit. They're a little bit ambivalent because they didn't actually expect Putin to outright invade Ukraine, and this is a very nasty invasion. I mean, the bombings that they've been doing in the cities of Kharkiv and Chernihiv. Experts viewing the footage that we have, and I viewed some of that footage, it's quite horrifying, think that they're using cluster munitions, which always kill civilians. The whole point of a cluster munition, not musician, is, a cluster bomb is that it's not precision targeted.
Right.
It spreads out to do maximum damage and kill indiscriminately, and it looks like Russia used those weapons. They are banned by most countries at this point, but not by Russia or by Ukraine. But
so they're basically carpet bombing.
Before this, the Christian right was really looking to Russia as sort of an important leader of what they see as, Christian civilization, Christendom, someone who can reawaken perhaps the Christian roots of the West. They said really absurd things about him because he's sticking it to the gays, which they also want to do and are doing, and transgender people like me, here in the United States. Putin's been fighting this culture wars agenda that they like for a while now, but they also have a lot of missionary activity going on in Ukraine. Ukraine is a state that they like to focus on as well for foreign adoptions, which is a big thing on the evangelical right. So they can't just be all in for Putin's invasion. But at the same time, the post-Soviet Russia is not the Soviet Union. And what we've seen is that it was never the authoritarianism that bothered our right-wing authoritarians, the Christian right and contemporary Republicans. It was the communism.
Right.
It was the godlessness. It was the socialism. But if you make Russia a Christian, mostly Christian, very Christian sort of centric authoritarian state, they love it, which honestly shouldn't have surprised us. I mean, if you look at some of Solzhenitsyn's 1980s speeches and how Solzhenitsyn, famous for writing the Gulag Archipelago and exposing the Soviet Gulag system, moved back to Russia, took Russian citizenship at the end of his life after being expelled from the Soviet Union. He embraced Putin because he was a Christian conservative. And so a lot of our Christian conservatives did as well. They were paying more attention than a lot of the rest of us to the religious dimensions of this. And they saw, that Russia changed. And so they dropped that whole, Russia is going to be the mythical northern kingdom of Magog and do Armageddon. They had to find someone else to do Armageddon, but Pat Robertson didn't get the memo.
They must have missed that memo. But you said something that was interesting, that, this isn't the same, country. It's not the communist Soviet Union. They're a mixed kind of economy, somewhat capitalist, more like gangster capitalism than anything. Mm-hmm. I don't think Tommy Tuberville got the message either, because Tommy Tuberville still thinks they're a communist country, and they're evidently starving, which is why Putin is doing this, because he doesn't want socialism to spread or something, and he needs farmland to feed his people. I guess that's what the dumbest senator in the U.S. Senate believes.
Ukraine was the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, but Russia's not exactly a site of famines these days. I mean, Russia's going to be okay, I think, for the most part, in terms of people having enough to eat. They are going to feel a lot of pain on imported goods with all of these sanctions, though, and with inflation, which I am for at this point. I mean, I hate the disproportionate impact that they're going to have on regular working families and people who didn't, choose this war. But I do think it's necessary at this point. The economic pain is going to be felt quite a lot at the top as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, as you were saying earlier, I mean, when Switzerland freezes your assets, you are really in the doghouse.
Hey, I know that you've got the world against you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Chrissy Stroop. Chrissy is a columnist for Open Democracy, also senior correspondent for Religion Dispatches, also the author of Empty the Pews, Stories of Leaving the Church. We'll get links out on how you can check that stuff out on social media. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast so you don't miss any portion of it. If you got a thought, question, comment, something you want to throw in to our conversation with Chrissy Stroop, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Now, you're my go-to person on virtually everything Russia. A lot of people blaming Joe Biden for this. It's all Biden's fault. And if it's not his fault, it's got to be that Obama's fault because he didn't do anything in 2014 with Crimea. It's no matter what it is, it can't be dear leader's fault because Donald Trump, he wouldn't allow this to happen. I want to get your thought on kind of that whole mess, that whole jumble of nonsense.
Well, you've got to expect extremely bad faith arguments from the right. I mean, the American right is just out in its own alternative facts land these days. What bothers me more is the tanky arguments from the left. You know, this is all NATO's fault. This is all, America's fault in that sense. And I would even agree that NATO shouldn't have been, rapidly expanded after the collapse of the Soviet Union. We had a moment where we might have been able to do more to encourage Russia to join the international community as a partner in good faith. And instead, we prescribed them shock therapy economics and, we continued to isolate them. That was bad, but, it's still just Putin chose to invade Ukraine and nothing justifies that, right? Certainly not NATO expansion.
Yeah. No, I get that. I'm there from the beginning. The oligarchs shouldn't have been able to take over. They should not have been. All of those mistakes at the beginning, the kleptocracy that was set up right from the start. Yeah, that's a problem.
And I mean, and Yeltsin and his cronies get some of the blame for that too, obviously. But do I think that the international community, the West, America, could have handled things differently? In retrospect, yeah, it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, but yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up, that it's easy to look back and go, oh, we would have done things differently. Because at the time, the world of thought was, hey, whip a little industry on them, free markets, give rich people everything because it'll trickle down. We now know, as I think most of us who were around then knew, that was never going to happen. But that was the common wisdom of the time.
I was 11 years old in a very pro-Reagan family, but I sure as hell know it now that it's all bullshit. But yeah. Can I say that on your show? Sorry.
Yeah, well, no. But you just did, and that's all right. So let's move that
FCC.
Along. Maybe we don't draw attention to it. No, and this is because this is important because I've gotten the right. The folks on the right saying, that Putin is, the guy, Biden's extremely weak, and he caused all this, which is ridiculous. And then from the left, I've taken a beating over NATO, which, look, I support the ideals of NATO, the idea to contain communism, the idea to spread democracy into other places, and to have governments working together and push down on hyper-nationalist militarism. I'm in favor of that mission. And I think if we can get everybody into NATO, maybe we don't have wars. Maybe if we decide we're going to if all of us would attack whoever who does this, maybe we wouldn't have any of this anymore.
I mean, that seems rather unrealistic to me. It's a sort
it
of
is
a nice
unrealistic.
idea, I suppose. And I mean, that's when your Pat Robertsons are going to be, oh, one world government. That's definitely a sign of the end times. But that's why they hate the UN. But yeah.
But now there's the other side of this.
Promoting democracy and open societies, yes, not with bombs, but promoting them, yeah.
Now, I do want to get your thoughts on the other side because the left is almost as lunatic fringe as the right is. In that, the NATO argument that you just went through. Then there's you're just being racist because these are white people you're defending and you're not doing anything in these other countries where there are these kind of wars that go on all the time. In Africa, why aren't you involved in that? And there's some point there. For me, the difference is this guy's got a massive nuclear army. This guy's the wealthiest guy in the world. He's got one of the top 3-4 most powerful people on the globe. That can't be allowed to stand.
yeah, when you have someone with a huge nuclear arsenal, and there's still very few nuclear powers in the world, right? We've tried to limit the proliferation of nuclear weapons because nuclear weapons in the wrong hands obviously could destroy our entire world, our entire species, our entire civilization. So that does definitely make it serious. Is there some racism in play? I mean, undoubtedly, we've seen some racism in places like, you know, in Bulgaria, when their president started talking about accepting Ukrainian refugees, he literally said, these are, you know, educated, intelligent people. They're not like the refugees we were getting from North Africa and the Middle East. I mean, he really spelled it out. It was very, very racist. But he also faced a lot of pushback for that. But, you know, Viktor Orban's Hungary, too, is welcoming Ukrainian refugees. There are about 500 million 500,000, sorry, 1,000.
Yeah, country's only 45 million.
Right. Yeah, I just multiplied the population of Ukraine by an order of magnitude there. I'm like Jesus with the Ukrainians. But, no, yeah, sorry. Yeah, 500,000. Viktor Orban is willing to take them. Why? Because they're white and they're culturally close to Hungarians in some ways.
Yeah.
So is there some racism going on here? Yes, but on the other hand, nuclear weapons, memories of World War II, desires not to have World War III, and it's this war in particular, and the invasion of Ukraine going back to 2013-14, the annexation of Crimea. Interestingly enough, also kind of under the cover of the Olympics going on around, you know, the last time Putin just did a Ukrainian land grab, they had the Sochi Olympics happening.
Yeah. So you're intimately, you know, aware of what's going on in that area. Everyone keeps asking the question why. You know, why did Putin do this now? Why was this such a big deal? Look, Ukraine wanted to get into the UN, you know, as far back as 2008. There's been a push to get them into the EU for the last couple of years. Why on the date that he decided? Why go then? Why go this heavy? You know, what was special about now?
Perhaps Putin feels like he's in some sense maybe running out of time. He's not getting any younger, you know, and I think he is sort of getting more deranged and detached from reality. Why exactly now? I don't know. I think in some ways he's probably happy to do it with a Democratic U.S. president because he has more animosity toward Democrats than Republicans for obvious reasons. It's a big middle finger to, you know, everybody who supports the post-war order, such as it still is, and our attempts to create, you know, a peaceful international community. And the ideology behind it has to do with Putin's deep-seated belief in Russian national greatness. You know, Putin doesn't necessarily believe in a lot of things. He certainly uses the Orthodox Church, and he invites them to be part of his, you know, inner circle of people who influence him. He needs the Russian Orthodox Church for legitimacy. He you know, wears a cross. He's a Christian, but he's not a very pious man, obviously. But I think he does believe in Russian national greatness. And I think he also believes that the world needs to have spheres of influence. There are great nations like Russia, and then there are countries that aren't even really countries, like Ukraine. They're just, I mean, the 19th century Russian imperialist term for Ukraine was Little Russia. They think of it as the little brother of the Russians, right? And so Putin is in this very abusive way saying, I'm going to have to use force to remind the Ukrainians who they are and, you know, who takes care of them and where they belong and put them in their place.
So your view, if I'm getting this right, is because I believe this is a rich guy saying, hey, I'm going to go in and plunder, steal, wanting the legacy of getting the old band back together. Is this kind of what I'm hearing from you? We're gonna come in, we're taking over, we're bringing you back under our wing of influence, like he did in Belarus, and then, you know, other dominoes fall, or he goes and pursues that. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you?
Well, sort of. I mean, it's never just one guy, right? I mean, Putin is a very important leader, not just a figurehead. Could things have gone differently if he hadn't succeeded Yeltsin? Very possibly. But there are a lot of Russians who support this kind of hyper-patriotism and this Russian nationalism and this view of the Russian world, this idea that the area surrounding Russia, the area that used to be in the Soviet Union, and maybe even the Warsaw Pact nations, belong in Russia's sphere of influence. Russia is the only great power there. Russia should have the primary cultural influence. And so to see them moving towards embracing Western values, real democracy, which, Ukraine also is still a long way from that, I should say. But I mean, hey, so is the United States these days.
Yeah.
We're not doing great. But yeah, I mean, the threat that they would embrace Western values, democracy, pluralism, toleration, LGBTQ rights, Putin can't stand that. He takes it in a very narcissistic way as an insult.
Yeah, and it looks like he's going scorched earth. Another Republican value. If he can't have it, nobody can. Because I'm looking at some of the bombings.
Exactly.
There's no hey, we want to take this over and fix it up. We're trashing this place. As I'm watching these carpet bombings happen.
Yeah. This is about power and ideology. It's not about him actually getting more money. I mean, the sanctions are going to cause problems even for, somebody as wily as Putin. He's not making money off this per se. This is what
it's power. It's
he
more power.
Sees as something he has to do to be this macho leader of the Russian world, which includes Ukraine in his vision. And unfortunately, many Russians feel that way.
So last question then, in looking at this, because their cultures are so aligned, they have a common language virtually. Does this ever end, or is this now going to be a constant back and forth?
I don't really know where things are going to go at this point. I think that it's pretty clear. Putin thought he was just going to march right into Kiev and the capital, depose the government, install his own guys. He thought he was going to pull sort of a, Brezhnev in Czechoslovakia, right, in 1968. But it's not working out that way. Now, the war has only gone on for 4 days at this point, but they're facing stiffer resistance than they thought they would face. First round of negotiations for peace didn't go anywhere. I have a hard time seeing Putin walk away from this anytime soon without international recognition of his annexation of Crimea at the very least, and maybe of the Donetsk and Luhansk so-called People's Republics that Russia completely, invented and trumped up to cause chaos in Ukraine. Ukraine is also a divided country, and in Crimea, in those eastern regions, there are more people than in Western Ukraine who have tended to look toward Russia culturally. They more often speak Russian as a native language, whereas in Western Ukraine, more often they speak Ukrainian as a native language. The West is more agrarian for the most part. The East is more urban, more industrialized. But, I don't think it's ever been anything like a majority that actually supports these people's republics that have done nothing but create a lot of violence and chaos for the working class people that live in that
It's going to be interesting to see where this works itself out. Chrissy, I appreciate you taking time, sharing some of that expertise with us. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again soon.
I'm always happy to join you, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Our good friend Chrissy Stroop. Make sure you check out her work over at Open Democracy, where she's a columnist, also senior correspondent at Religion Dispatches, and the book Empty the Pews, Stories of Leaving the Church. We'll get links out of how you can check that out on social media. If you've missed any of today's program thus far, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast. Take the program on the go wherever you're going. As always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. And are there a bunch? Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day that Sue Cowan Williams filed a lawsuit for equal pay for black teachers in Little Rock, Arkansas. 86 black teachers worked in the city's segregated school system. They were all members of the Little Rock Classroom Teachers Association. In 1941, the teachers formed a salary adjustment committee to look into pay discrimination. What they found there was a wide gap between black and white salaries. The average white elementary school teacher made $526 a year, while the black teacher earned only $321. White high school teachers brought home $856 a year, while black teachers only made $567. Backed with this research, the committee presented a petition to the school board demanding an end to pay discrimination. The board tabled the petition, and that summer passed another round of unequal pay raises. The teachers then approached the NAACP and asked them to handle their case. Thurgood Marshall agreed to take up the lawsuit. Marshall would go on to become the first black U.S. Supreme Court justice. Sue Cowan Williams, the head of the English department at Dunbar High School, was selected as the plaintiff for the case. The teachers lost their lawsuit and then won on appeal, but Williams paid a price for her involvement. The next school year, the school district did not renew her contract. She was finally rehired to teach at Dunbar a decade later. But first, the school superintendent called Williams to ask her if she had, quote, learned her lesson. It was a lesson that many workers have learned, that there is often a high personal cost for standing up for justice on the job. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Mega investor Warren Buffett once held a big portfolio of daily and weekly newspapers, and he specialized in squeezing out competitors so each held a local monopoly. Then he'd chop staff and news content, letting him glean annual profit margins above 30%. But alas for poor Warren, along came the internet, allowing people to root around for free to find local information missing from his hollowed-out papers. They began losing readers, advertising, and profits, so in 2020, Buffett sold out his entire portfolio. But rather than concede that maybe his slash-and-burn profit maximization approach had produced inferior products, the Oracle of Omaha, as Wall Street had labeled him, blasted the whole idea of local newspapers as dinosaurs. They're toast, he proclaimed. But wait, your oracleness. When done right, local publications both chronicle and help shape a community story. And that's a social benefit that's as valuable and as marketable as ever. It's not that people have given up on local news, but that corporate-owned papers did. They're not local, not newsy, and not of, by and far, the workaday people in our communities. For example, nearly every corporate daily publishes a business section, which mostly amounts to yesterday's stock prices, corporate press releases, and syndicated filler. Does even 1% of the population read that stuff? Meanwhile, how about economic news of interest to the great majority of locals who are workaday families? Where's the regular section that digs into the wages, workplace conditions, and other real-life issues that confront this majority on a daily basis? This is Jim Hightower saying the relevant indicator of the well-being of nearly every American family is not the Dow Jones average, but the Doug Jones average. How are Doug and Donna doing? That's news that would sell papers.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, download the podcast from the website. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Well, the Democrats are saying 3 weeks. 3 weeks they want to have the confirmation all wrapped up and all done. The hearings March 21st is what they're saying. This way they can get on to what they got to get on to. Problem is you got a bunch of Republicans going, no, can't do it now. Things bad. No, it's got to get done. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day our good friend, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So what do you think? A couple of weeks, March 21st, too soon? Should we hold off because of the war? What excuse can we get to hold this off?
Well, first of all, Rick, I was sort of saying to myself, okay, come on, White House, come on, a little faster. I thought maybe, it should go a little faster. I know they've got to vet everything, but that, they put out the, nominee and very qualified. We've all talked about her qualifications. Senator Grassley praised her with the sentencing, language and legislation. And so now, it's formal. There's no reason to delay. No, the war in the Ukraine, as terrible as what Russia is doing and as horrible as the entire thing is, we continue on. We don't stop the country over here. Missiles are not flying onto our soil. And again, we've got to support the Ukraine, but we don't stop the process of the country. That's an excuse. So the Democrats just have to, buckle down, belly up to the bar, whatever you want to say, and just do it. I highly doubt they are going to have anybody against them, and I still think it's possible there will be a few Republican votes. So they just need to do it.
So odds, 5, less than 5, more than 5.
Oh, I'm just thinking right now. I'm going to go with less than 5 right now.
Yeah, that seems to be the sane bet. Considering she only got 3 votes in the lower federal for the lower federal court nomination.
There'll be a little bit more pressure here. Again, I don't believe that anybody on the Democrat side is going to turn on this vote. So, just go.
Better not.
Just
there
go.
Better not be. Because, look, here's the thing. I think a lot of people, because here's I always come up with these doomsday scenarios, as you know, like we did with the infrastructure bill where I feared at the end we got nothing. Part of my fear was, just one Democrat torpedoes the whole thing. The Democrats take a beating in November, and they lose another Supreme Court seat. Because we just see the news that Ted Deutsch of Florida has announced he is not going to run again, the 31st Democrat to retire this cycle, which is kind of sending the signal that, not going to be a good year.
Well, the year is technically not good right now. However, it is fluid. It's not finished. I sent you, I think, a while back, the 8 points I made. The Republicans are tending to do 2 of the points that I made to help the Democratic side. They're reliving the last election, over and over, and they're not necessarily recruiting the best candidates. So, there's, again, a lot of this is going to be in the hands of the Democratic side, how they want to, continue on this year. But, it's past time that they will, try to make the process, quote, more open or more lengthy, for example, on the Supreme Court appointment. It gains them nothing to do that. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, no, get this through, get it done, get to work on all the other stuff that needs to happen. And look, we can't get bogged down on what's going on in Ukraine. Still got to move some voting rights legislation, still got to get some economic stuff done. There's still work to be done. I don't want what's happening in Ukraine to completely bog everything else down.
Again, the Ukraine it's a terrible situation. You've got a madman in Russia. We need to do, the president's done a good job. We need to do, all we can do with our allies. But, again, the missiles, are not incoming onto our soil. We are not in bomb shelters. And, we have to continue on as a country. To do otherwise and to halt everything over here would be a complete disaster. It would be an economic disaster.
Yeah. And speaking of economic disaster, I'm looking at what's going on over in Russia. Everybody's freezing them out. Everything's basically shutting down. Even got Switzerland, going after their assets. Things not looking good there.
When you get Switzerland against you, it's quite amazing. And if you look at it, the European Union has come together as it's in general together, but it's come together as it has not come together in quite a few years, completely in tune with going against Russia. And there's also, sports entities that have now, and associations that have kicked Russia out of the process. There's, again, you mentioned Switzerland. That's amazing. Switzerland is it's the neutral country, and it's not neutral when it comes to Russia. There's the divestiture, sanctions that are out there. Historically, neutral countries have turned. Of course, China, loves Putin, but other than that, a lot of countries have turned. So it's a big deal, and Putin is going to feel the crunch. The stock market did today in Moscow. I still don't buy, and by the way, we cut off the Russian central bank. The United States did.
Yeah.
I still don't buy that he is, I buy that he's a madman, he's a dictator, I buy all that. I still don't buy that he's so out of reality he did this. I think he miscalculated the moves. I think he miscalculated how the world would react. But I think he had intentions to, very pragmatically tried to get his way with the Ukraine and NATO.
Yeah, I think he thought it was going to go in. It was going to be a weekend. Then you could bring everybody home, be a big parade, everybody happy. And we would say nothing because we're from the outside, we look very divided. Surprisingly, right. When you get 74, 75% of people being polled saying yes, what's going on is in the right direction, I think that's pretty remarkable.
It's huge. And people are, together on this. And, Trump did his thing about what a genius Putin was, and frankly, that backfired. A lot of the people came out and say, "Wait a minute,"
Yeah, but do you find it interesting? Like, was it today he came out and said that if it weren't for him, that NATO wouldn't be as strong as they are, and we should all be thankful to him. Isn't it amazing how he does everything all the time, and it's always right?
Well, it's not shocking. It's narcissistic answer on every single thing that anybody says about anybody in the world. He's going to have the best, the brightest, they love him, and so he's going to provide that type of answer of what he did to quote reform NATO.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's a headline. He gets a headline.
And the thing that gets me is all of this talk about how he would be tougher and how he was going to do all this other stuff. As I said earlier in the show, that every president would have done the exact same thing except for Trump, who I just think there's the part of me that goes, he would have given the justification. It's not us. Don't worry about it. That's their problem. Leave him alone. He's a good guy. I really believe he'd have gone that route.
Oh, I agree with you. Look, one thing about Trump, he wouldn't have gone in with troops. That's what everybody's saying.
No way.
That I know. Oh, he would have had the troops, storming the ground. He wouldn't have, because he didn't in some of the past situations. So he wouldn't have done that.
No, he's one of those paper tigers. You poke him in the chest, he backs down. That's at least my view. I also wanted to get your thoughts on the fact that Biden is denying executive privilege to Peter Navarro and Michael Flynn. Is that a big deal?
Well, it's not. I don't think it's unexpected. I don't think.
I don't either, but I just wanted to get your thoughts. If it was a big deal. Now, Navarro said he's gonna take it all the way to the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah.
He's gonna fight because he's got the money to do it. And Flynn, his attorney, said that, well, no big deal. We didn't ask for it. So.
I think that it's significant. He's going to deny what they want. What I think they deeply want. I don't care what in fact Michael Flynn says. He was National Security Advisor, and then Navarro was the former trade advisor. And I think they would like protection if they could get it. But this will force them to make a choice. Do they want to talk to the committee, or do they want to face criminal referral? Which has happened already because the Justice Department did put some teeth behind that. With the whole Bannon move.
Yep.
Navarro said, he's going to take it to the Supreme Court, and then Flynn's people, his lawyers took it more lightly. But it didn't surprise me that President Biden made that move, I didn't think he would give them executive privilege. That part of the story didn't surprise me at all.
No, and look, Navarro's been running around basically talking to anybody who will listen about the stuff that they did. So good luck with the commission. I also wanted to get your thoughts on the fact that the president sent a delegation of former senior defense and security folks to Taiwan for a powwow. Evidently, the administration says they're saying it's kind of a sign of support for Taiwan there. I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Well, it is. It is a big deal because, the president is sending that delegation to Taiwan. China always prefers we don't do that type of thing. They prefer that a couple of things that they are touchy about. One of them is Taiwan. The other is the Dalai Lama. They don't even want him, near the Capitol or near the White House. They're just super hyper about that, and Taiwan's the same thing. And any time we send a delegation, it is a big deal. Now, the president is sending an unofficial delegation, of former U.S. defense and national security officials, to Taiwan. He sent them. And it doesn't matter official or unofficial. The fact remains he's sending them. I think it's a good strategic move. Michael Mullen, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under President Bush and Obama, is going to be there. And then they've got the Deputy National Security Advisor for Iraq and Afghanistan under Bush, which was Megan O'Sullivan. Then they had a policy. I can't remember exactly who was Under Secretary of Defense for Obama. They've got a policy person going, and I think one other Obama official. So the really good thing about it, it's a great bipartisan delegation that transcends two presidents and two presidencies. And so I think it's a good time to do it. It's a good time to send a message to China. And I think China has been looking at what Russia's doing in the Ukraine, and it's not been the boom, you're in for a day and done type of deal. So maybe this will be a message to China.
Now, I hope. Look, I don't want to start World War III. We don't need it, but you've got to show some support for the folks that we
Correct.
have agreements with, and that we've given our word to.
Right, and that's what the president has done. Again, nobody is going to send our troops alone, boots on the ground into the Ukraine. Nobody is going to do that, and shouldn't. If there was going to be some type of military intervention, it would be everybody under the sun together, or nobody singularly doing it. We provided monetary support and moral support and everything we can do with for the Ukraine. So I think the president's made the right steps. And again, with Taiwan, the fact of sending an unofficial delegation, a bipartisan basis of a couple of the presidencies that have existed, I think in itself it's a good international move, and it sends a good message.
I think the president's been knocking it out of the park here.
Oh, he has
recently. Look, I've got some problems with what's going on, but I think he's been doing a fantastic job, and thank goodness he is in that position at this moment. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, talking about what's going on in the state of affairs globally and here nationally. You got a thought, question, comment you want to jump in the middle of? 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. If you've missed any portion of the program, all right there at thericksmithshow.com. Now, tomorrow, Bob, I want to get to the big powwow. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a State of the Union address.
Right.
The president's going to make his case about the last year and how, I'm sure the 6-7 million jobs he's created is going to be there. I'm sure, the fact that the economy's doing better, that's going to happen. I'm sure he's going to address some of our problems. And I'm sure a lot of it's going to be what's going on in Ukraine. Anything you think that's going to jump out tomorrow?
I don't think that, it's going to necessarily be able to move a legislative agenda in a sense because there's a speech tomorrow night. I don't think it's going to hurt the legislative agenda. That's all wrapped up, way beyond the president, frankly, in the Senate and the 50-50 vote, et cetera. But the president will mention, obviously, some domestic issues. I think what'll stand out is that he will basically take, the original BBB, Build Back America, and I think he'll take it in a little bit maybe direction of which way, it should be looked at. The Ukraine, again, is going to be, I think, a bright spot. And then, of course, there's the nomination for the Supreme Court. So, I would think, though, that, there'll have to be an issue addressed about, energy and inflation and where they're going to go. And that's why I think he'll probably take kind of pieces of what he was trying to do in the legislation that couldn't make it through the Senate, the human infrastructure bill. And I think he'll hit some pieces of it.
Yeah, I think he's got to do some of that. He's got to make the case of why he's how things have gone and that he's been on top of these issues, because too much of what's out there is that he's not paying attention, he doesn't care, he's dithering. I think he's got to come out and strongly state, this is what we did, this is what we wanted to do and couldn't get it done. This is what what we plan to do when we get things done. I think he's got to come out in that front.
Right, and I think I think that the crisis in Ukraine is a good opportunity for President Biden to take this to another level. What I mean by that is that not the usual old politics of the 20th century, but to bring it to another level about our world and our interconnection to other countries, and how the president wants to stand up for what we are supposed to believe in, which is a democracy. And I would think that he can hit home on that. I would believe.
Yeah, well, I sure hope so. Now, the interesting thing that's going to come out for me tomorrow is you've got Congresswoman Tlaib going to give the after response, which I saw one person say that it's kind of like keying your own car by having her do that. And I think you would agree.
I've said this. I've been asked this all over radio that I've been doing in the last week, and I frankly was shocked, politically appalled at the fact that she's going to do it, because you have the Republicans, the loyal opposition, quote, that makes statements, and they pick a couple people, one for radio, one for TV. I just don't think there needs to be a Democratic response to the Democratic president. I don't believe it should happen. I don't know why it's happening, and I don't think she's going to get a ton of favorable credit for doing it.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know why in this moment you would do this. Don't we have enough problems?
Exactly.
So what do you I'm going, what would the response be? What is this going to be attacking Joe Manchin? Which again, I'm not totally against if there's an end game to it. If it's just to tick off Manchin so we don't get anything else, I don't know that I'm in favor of that. But if the tactic is we're going to push him in a direction that will get us long term to a strategy done, okay. But if it's just throwing gasoline on a fire, I don't know. I don't think I'm there.
Well, see, this is the point of Manchin. I mean, there's 100 ways to skin a cat, and with Manchin, of course, it's difficult because of his position in West Virginia, a unique position as a very strong Democratic figure in a very, obviously red state. But if her intention is Manchin, this is not the Manchin State of the Union. This is the Biden State of the Union, the President of the United States. And so I just don't see something gained in there, because what's she going to say? Well, the president couldn't make or force Manchin to vote this way. I mean, what do you say on this? I don't get it. I don't think it's productive. I think you battle this, in other ways.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But it'll be interesting. I can't wait to see what storm this creates. But as always, Bob, I appreciate the time. Great stuff.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. No, I look, I don't have a problem with Representative Tlaib. I don't. I just think that this is the wrong moment. because you know what the next day's news cycle is going to be. It's going to be all about grievance. In a moment when we need to see some bit of unity, or you need a clear, concise message of, we need to be pushing in a direction, the grievance, I don't think it helps. Is it going to move Biden any further to one position or the other? I don't think so. I think Biden will do as much as he can. And to be honest, I think he has gone probably too long fighting for some of the things that are in the Build Back Better plan. Some of the things that Manchin said from the start wasn't in favor of. This is where, as a progressive myself, as a quote-unquote liberal myself, as someone who wants to do more to help on poverty fronts, to help the homeless, to make sure we get education for everyone, to make sure health care is available, as far as I am on those issues, politics is about the art of what's possible. It's about getting stuff done. I mean, for me, that's the answer. It's about getting things done. And this was the argument we had back before on, tying Build Back Better to the infrastructure bill, which at the beginning, full disclosure, I was in favor of. Okay, for the short term, let's hold these, because the second you get the infrastructure bill that everybody agrees on, as soon as you get that, the other one's dead. Everyone knew that. So for me, it was about leveraging the two of them as long as you could. It was about pushing Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema as far as you could get them, and then take what you could get and run with it. And the sad reality are those who are kicking and screaming and slamming their fists on the table. No, we want it all. Well, guess what? You don't always get it all. And in this vein, not only did we not get it all, we didn't get anything. And until you go, well, the art of possible. Again, this goes back to 8th grade civics classes. This goes back to basic governance. The idea that there's sometimes going to be that ugly 4-letter word of compromise. And yes, I know compromise is more than 4 letters. So don't send me any evil emails. Or do, please, rick@thericksmithshow.com. But, this is one of those things where I come back to, you learn this as a kid. This is how government works. Get what you can get, put it into law, get it moving, get it started, and then you go back, you build a movement to expand it. Build Back Better should have passed 6 months ago. We should be enjoying the fruits of those investments as we speak. But because politically there was that fighting, we want it all, we want more. And look, at the beginning, I was there. At the beginning, I was saying the same thing. Let's get as much as we can. Because we need it. We need massive investment. But you take what you can get. So my fear, and again, you can write this down if you have to. My fear is that on Wednesday morning you wake up and you find that all that's being said is the grievance that comes out of Tlaib's response and the grievance that the media focuses on, and virtually nothing that the president says. For me, the State of the Union is about the president. Hit that message. To step on those toes, to divert that message in any way, not a great idea. And again, it shows a weakness within the Democratic Party. It shows that they're buying what's being said in the media as well. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, by all means, download the podcast. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Share the podcast. Please do. Helps us out. Every click, every download helps us expand our reach, our power, our message. So please, by all means, share. Going to be an interesting week. State of the Union, all the horrible that's going on, the war crimes we're living through in real time in Ukraine, all of that. Well, stuff to get to. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.